So we're on Yud Ches Amud Aleph, 5 lines down. Gufa. Amarava zar she'achal min ha'oila lefnei zrika chutz l'chayma lev Shimon loika chapish. We had quoted. We were saying we're going to go a little further on this quote. Rava had said a zar that ate from an oila. So you already have a bunch of problems, right? He's a zar who's eating kachim, kachim. An oila is kachim. So that's strike number one. And he's eating an oila no one's supposed to eat. Even a kain's not supposed to eat it. So that's strike number two. Lifnei zrika, and it's before the zrika. So the carbon, even if there were, let's say it was a shlamim, you're not allowed to eat from a shlamim prior to the zrika. You have to finish the avodah. So this is prior to doing the avodah. And chutz l'chayma, finally, it's also chutz l'chayma. It's outside Yerushalayim. Kachim is only allowed to be eaten in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's two additional strikes. That first of all, it's being eaten outside of the Beis Hamikdash, like kachim. And second of all, even kachim kalim you have to eat in Yerushalayim. This is outside Yerushalayim. So you have a total of 5 problems, 5 malchus that you get for this. And all 5 of these things were all referenced in the pasuk that we had said before. They all came from that our extensive analysis of the pasuk that we learned. We first wanted to say we were learning it out was a kal v'chaymer. Then we said ein masir min adin. So we said no, that the pasuk is actually a fully extra pasuk. We're on Yud Ches Amud Aleph. We're just the Gemara's repeating what the Brisa had brought, that a zar that eats an oila before zrika outside of the chayma is chayiv 5 malchus. The Shimon like a chamish. According to Shimon, he gets 5 malchus. In fact, the Gemara is going to ask a bunch of things that there should be an additional malchus. The Rashi says, it says by Meluim ki koydeshem, and Rashi says lifi shehem kachek kachim lahazazar kol kachek kachim, that there's an additional lav for a zar eating kachek kachim. Meaning, in addition to the fact that it's a zar eating kachim, there's this additional one for a zar specifically eating kachim. So that should be a 6th malchus. The Gemara, hani lehechad kahanim chazi, that lav is only applies where kikaydesh that it has a din of kaidish that someone's allowed to eat, a kain is allowed to eat, and a zar can't. But over here, where even a kain can't eat it for all the reasons for all the various reasons. It's an oila, it's chutz l'chayma, it's l'fnei zrika. So since it's not kosher even to a kayin, this lav would not apply to a zar. This lav is only a lav where a zar eats kachei kachim that could have been eaten by a kayin. Nami lechazi, it's excluded. And this is going to be a common theme in the Terutzim. Let's add on a 6th lav because of the pasuk which the pashut pshat in the pasuk is you can't eat basar that's in a sada that's a treifa. That means it died not from shchita, that you're not allowed to eat it. But we darshan kivish yatsa basar chutzla mechitzasei nesar. Any basar that goes out of its boundaries of where it's allowed to be eaten becomes asar. And Rashi explains this. What are the examples? The bottom Rashi gives yatsa basar chutz mesasei nesar. Mibesadi yisera kadaya kasada she'em ba mechitzas. Ulamdein mikan, we will see from here, kachei kachim chutz l'klayim, kachei kachim that are outside of the Beis Hamikdash. L'klayim is the curtain around the Mishkan, but it's equivalent to the walls around the Beis Hamikdash. Another example is uber shehoitzi yad b'shas shchitas imay, an uber that stuck a limb outside of the mother during the time of the mother's shchita. So that part wasn't included in the shchita. Right? When you shech the mother, it usually kashers a uber that's inside the mother. But if the uber has a limb sticking out at the time of the shechita, it's not included in the shechita. But in any case, this is a lav for something that has gone out of where it's supposed to be. So this case that we're talking about, a zar she'acham and chutz l'chayma, It's chutz l'chayma. It's outside of where kachim kachim is supposed to be. So that should be an additional lav. So Gemara, again, the same teretz. That which we said is a lav for going outside of its machisa, that's only when it's where it's supposed to be, it would be allowed. Over here, you have all the additional problems with this car, with this basar, so it's going to be excluded from that lav. The pasuk kikodesh haim. I think it's haim, right? That's what that hay is. Yeah. Kol shebekaidish kasul, ba kasul loisa say alachilase. Anything that's kaidish that becomes nipsal, the Torah is saying it gets an extra loisa say. It has an extra lab. And this kachik kachim that was taken l'chutz becomes puzzle. It's no longer a kosher carbon. So it should be again an additional lab because of this. Again, the same teretz that we've given in the previous two kashas. That's only if before it became puzzle, it was able to be eaten. This was puzzled by going out. The fact that you're a zar doesn't puzzle the carbon, it just means you're not allowed to eat it. But since you're a zar, since it was a zar that was eating it, and it's an oila, it wasn't able to be eaten even before it became nifsal, the lav would not be applicable. It's going to be excluded. Let's say a fourth attempt where we to say that there's an additional lav. The Tanya I'm a kolshuhu bekolol tia. The Torah says anything that has a din that should be fully destroyed, which is an oila. An oila is not allowed to be eaten; it has to be fully consumed on the mizbech. Leading loisa say al chilasai. That's to give a loisa say on the eating an oila, and that there's no reference in there that it has to be something that would otherwise be available, because a oila is never eaten by anyone. So you can't say that it's not. Would be otherwise chazi. The Gemara einachanami. This you're right. This is really would add on a sixth lav. Rava mehai kroka amar. Rava was just talking about the original Gemara that we were talking about on the previous Amud, where we learned from the pasuk that we darshened all the different things we wanted to say from a kal from meiser, and then in the end we said no, it's really that the whole pasuk is extra. So all these halachas that is zar who eats kachim and then it's chutz l'chaim and it's chutz l'klayim, all these things are all learned out from that pasuk. This is from a different pasuk. Rava was only talking about the original pasuk.
But this pasuk is in Aseh, right?
Which pasuk? Kolshu.
Kolshu b'kolo.
Let me see. Tanya Kolshu b'kol tia litin loisaselichasi. Let me see where that pasuk is. Chol tia. But if you look at the Bach, b'chol tia loisoichal. Right? He quotes the pasuk. He quotes the whole pasuk. Yeah, so it has a lav in it also. Amar Gidol Amarav. Kayan she'achol mechatas va'asham lifnei zrika. This is like a nice light kachim sugya. You don't consider it light.
No.
It is because we're not getting deep into the different karbonis. But a chatas and asham are kachay are I think they're kachay kachim, but a kayan is allowed to eat a portion of them. Ayla, nothing could be eaten. A shlamim, even the bailam can eat it. So Amarav, kayan that ate mechatas va'asham lifnei zrika. He didn't wait for the zrikas adam. Again, the zrikas adam is the operative part of the avodah that makes the whole avodah tick. And he didn't wait for the end of the avodah, which is when the basar becomes roy for the kain to eat it. He ate it prior to that. Like he gets malchus. My timer. The Torah says that those that facilitated the kapara, meaning the kaihanim, are allowed to eat the chatas and asham. But we say asher kuba b'hem. It's only after they provide the kapara, which is when there's a zrikas dam. But before the zrikas dam, when there's no kapara, a person whose animal gets lost or tummy or something happens, so it becomes possible for the zrika, he has to bring, if he did a avera that requires him to bring a chatas, he has to bring a new chatas. Once there's a zrika, he's finished. But this kain ate it before the bialim achieved their kapara, he's going to be over on a lap. Dr. Gemara, this you should be right on top of this because your previous question, Habab Machlal Essay Lavu, the Chayru you see from here, the Torah is not saying you're not allowed to eat it. It says you should eat it after the kapara, but it's not saying there's a lav on not eating it beforehand. So the Chayru you're seeing that a lav Habab Machlal Essay, a lav that comes by intimation, by inference from the fact that Torah says you can't eat it after kapara, that means you can't eat it beforehand. That seems to say that that's a law that you get Makkos. Right? He said, Master Rava asked a question, any behema that has split hooves and its hoof is split into two separate parts, malagera, and it chews its cud. A behema oisa techelu, that you could eat. Oisa techelu, but no other animal can you eat. What does the pasuk have to give you? An additional, what does it have to say? You cannot eat anything that's lacking these simanim. Why don't you just say that it's a lav haba mechal essay? Why does the Torah have to tell you a direct lav? So the Gemara says that's a good kasha. And the truth is, a lav haba mechal essay, l'chayra is not a lav. Eliyat mahachayat. We have to say that Rav Gidel was saying a different thing. I'm Rav Gidel Amarav. Zar sha'oicha michatas v'asham. Before we were talking about a kohen that ate from the chatas and asham before zrika. Now we're talking about a zar that ate from the chatas and asham lifnei zrika, before zrika, potter. He's going to be potter. The Torah says a zar is not allowed to eat from a chatas and asham, but a zar is going to be potter. My time, because a kohen certainly, like we said, is going to be potter because it's only a lava babachol essay. But what about a zar that eats a my time? Damakra, va'oichla oisam asher kuba b'hem. Kol hechad b'kina va'achla oisam asher kuba b'hem karina b'hem.
But a kohen,
It only is going to be
considered. I thought it was allowed.
No, we came to the conclusion that a kohen couldn't get malchus because it's only a lava babachol essay. By the original, right? But then we asked the kasha on that.
We asked the kasha.
Therefore, we reinterpreted Rav Gidel Amarav.
Yeah.
This is a new version of Gidel Amarav, so we're dispensing with the earlier version. I'm sorry. Yeah. So now we're saying a zarsha that eats from the chatas and asham before the zrika is potter. Because the Torah says, it's only when the Kaihanim are allowed to eat it. The pasuk is not going to be included, not going to be an isser lav for the zar when the kain is not allowed to eat it either.
And that's why by an oil the zar would get.
I'm sorry?
And
but after Zrika, the Zar would the Zar would be Chayiv Malchus because the Torah says it's only for a Kohen, not for a Zar.
No, by an Ayla, I mean.
By an Ayla, but not when it was.
We said earlier, the first thing we said was that a Zar who eats before an Ayla before Zrika would get.
No, we weren't talking about an Ayla. You mean that was a previous Gemara?
Right. Now
we're just talking about a Chatz Hashem. Ayla is a separate
right.
Separate issue.
Even though by an Asham he's potter, by a Ayla he would be chayav before Zrika.
An Ayla, the Kain is not allowed to eat from it either. No one's allowed to eat from an Ayla. Ayla's fully.
And I'm saying the Malchus before the Zrika is what I'm talking about.
Right. So we said when it's not chazi anyway, then there would not be that lav. That's the truth. Is I'm not sure. Once we came at the end. Since we said at the end that anyway, when just only talking about the things that were in that pasuk, I don't know if those terutzim are still valid, but yeah. So we had said in the Mishnah, back in the Mishnah in Daf Yud Zayin, it's not weird. It's not on Yud Zayin. Where's the Mishnah? I guess it is. We had said after we had said the din that machlekes in the Mishnah. We had said in the Mishnah, we had said that bikurim, that if someone eats it before, if a kayin eats bikurim before kriya, it means bikurim are brought when they take the first fruit of the year are brought to Yerushalayim, and they're placed in front of the mizbeach, and the owner says a kriya. There's a specific kriya, a parsha in the Torah that he has to read, and at that point, and it belongs to the Kehanim, and the Kehanim could eat it. So in the Mishnah, we had said that bikurim before Hanacha, the Kehanim, if the Kohen eats it before kriya, before the Bailam did the kriya, the Kohen is going to be over on a lav. The Mishnah and the Gemara had said this is a machlekes. There's another man Amar who says that it's not the kriya that makes it that the kohen is not allowed to eat it, that makes it the kohen can eat it, but rather it's the hanacha, it's placing it in front of the mizbeach. So even if he placed it in front of the mizbeach, but there was no kriya yet, at that point already the kohen is not going to get Makkos for eating it. So Amar, and this is Amar Abelaz, Amar Hoshia, bikurim hanacha makaves behen kriya ein makaves behen. The hanacha, the placing it down to the mizbeach, unlike what it said in our Mishnah, there's a Tana that says the other way around, that it's the hanacha, the placing it in front of the mizbeach, and not the kriya that makes it the kohen allowed to eat it. And prior to that, he's going to be chayav. So Gemara, mi amar Elazar hachi, amar Elazar, amar Hoshia, hifrish bikurim kaidem lechag, v'avar aleim achab yakav. If someone separated bikurim before Sukkos, and then after Sukkos he brought it to Yerushalayim, he has to leave it to Rak. And this is because, leaving aside the lav and the malchus, there's two separate dinim of bikurim. There's a din of bikurim that between Shavuos and Sukkos, a person who brings bikurim has to read the parsha, do the kriya. After Sukkos, that kriya, the Torah, this is a midaraisa, there's no kriya. There are other examples of people who are excluded from kriya, as we're going to see. A ger doesn't read the kriya because it's reference our fathers and it's not applicable to him. So in addition, there's also a time-based exclusion from the din of kriya. So we'll get back to how this works with our discussion over here of whether the hanacha is ma'akav or the kriya is ma'akav. So Zakta Gemara. So the Brisa says, if you brought bikurim before Sukkot, so it gets a din that it needs to have a kriya. This bikurim needs kriya. And then it passed Sukkot, so you're no longer able to do the kriya. The new din of kriya the new din of bikurim kicks in, where you don't have a kriya associated with it, so you can't do the kriya anymore. So you're not allowed to eat that bikurim. You have to leave it to Ra. It can't be given to a kohen. The kohen's not going to be able to eat it. The reason is because after Sukkot you can't do a kriya. If you say that kriya is not ma'akiv, that you never had to do the kriya, how can you say that you have to leave it to Rat after Sukkot because you can't do the kriya? But according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Hoshia, Lechura, we said only the hanacha is ma'akiv, but the kriya it's a mitzvah to do so, but it's not ma'akiv. So how could you say that you can't eat it if the kriya even before in its time when it's supposed to be given? The problem with this bikurim is that it spanned the time in between when you're supposed to have kriya and when you're not. But if even when you're supposed to have kriya, it's not ma'akiv, how could you say that after this amount of kriya it is ma'akiv? And for the Gemara, no, it could be such a thing. That we do find an example. We find such a shita. We find such a concept. This we find all throughout Shas. Kol haroy labila ein bila ma'kaves boy. Kol she'ein roy labila ein bila ma'kaves boy. This is a din legabe minchas. A mincha you have to mix the flour. The Torah says that. So there's a shita that says you have to. The most you can put into a kli is, I think, 60 sa, more than 60 sads in the fifth. So you have to split it into two kalim. And the Gemara asks about why does it have to be that the kli has to be able to accommodate bila, that it should be able to be mixed. we know that the halacha is that mixing is not ma'akiv. Even if you don't mix the mincha, it's still a kosher mincha. So why would having a kli that doesn't accommodate mixing passel the mincha? And the Gemara answers because while it's true that you don't need to have bila, you don't have to actually mix it, being able to accommodate bila, potentially being able to mix it, can passel it. So you can have such a thing that the actual thing is not ma'akiv, but that you're able to do it can be ma'akiv. And we're saying the same thing over here, Lagabe Bikurim. After Sukkot, when you're no longer able to do Kriya, even though Kriya is not ma'akiv on its own, the Ikadin of Kriya is not ma'akiv, but it's still, if you're unable if you have something that has a din Kriya, because this really was from before Sukkot, but you're no longer able to do the Kriya, that's ma'akiv and it will make it possible. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Masila Kader Asi. He said, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, instead of this saying over b'shem Rabbi Elazar Amar Rav Hoshia that Bikurim Hanachas Ma'akiv and Kriya is not, he said it over as a member from Rav Asi b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. But once you're saying it over from Rabbi Yechanan, Kashalei to Rabbi Yechanan to Rabbi Yechanan, this causes trouble because Rabbi Yechanan we see holds otherwise. Umi Amar Rabbi Yechanan Bikurim Hanacha Ma'akeves B'en Kriya Ein Ma'akeves B'en. Does Rabbi Yechanan really agree with this? From what time are Bikurim mutter to a kain? Those that are roy lekriya, like we said prior to Sukkot, would be an example. Mishakara aleim, from the time that you do kriya. So you're seeing he seems to be saying that it becomes mutter lekahanim from kriya. So you see that he's saying kriya is ma'akev. Again, this is not like what we just quoted b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. And those that are not roy l'kriya after Sukkot, misharo pnei abayis, from when they come into the Beis Hamikdash. But it sounds like it doesn't need the hanacha. Hanacha means placing it in front of the mizbech. This is before you even have hanacha. Ro pnei abayis just means when it enters the Beis Hamikdash, not when it comes to the mizbech. So kasha kriya, kasha hanacha. Both of these things are shver. So talking about kriya like kasha harub shemin harabanan. No, you could say, although he quotes two opposite things. One, he says Kriya is ma'akiv, and one says it's not. This is all going back to what we said at the beginning in the Gemara right after we learned the Mishnah. We had the Machlokes Tanoim. We said the Rabbanan hold. The Mishnah had said that Kriya is ma'akiv. The Mishnah said you're going to be mechuyev, a kain is going to be mechuyev prior to Kriya. He's going to get Makkos for eating the Bikurim. So that was Reb Shimon, but then we brought the Rabbanan who disagree. So one he's quoting the Reb Shimon, and the other one he's quoting the Rabbanan. He's quoting different Tanaim. Hanacha na milikash, and Hanacha is also not shver. Where we say that Hanacha is makav, Hanacha is not makav. Harab Yehuda Haraban, where he says Hanacha is makav, that's the Rabbanan. But we're going to see there's a Rabbi Yehuda who holds a Tana Rabbi Yehuda who holds that Hanacha is not makav. Where do we see my Rabbi Yehuda? Where do we see Rabbi Yehuda holds Hanacha is not makav? The Tanya Yehuda Aimer. Anachasai hinachtai. The Torah says legabe v'ati hine evesias reishis pri adam legabe bikurim asher nasati li Hashem v'hinachtai lefnei Hashem elikecha, that you placed in front of Hashem. He says zu tnufa. This is a reference not to placing it to the mizbeach, but rather it's a reference to waving the bikurim. That there's a mitzvah to wave the bikurim. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. How do you know it's a reference to Tnufa? Maybe the Torah says Hinachte. Why are you saying it means waving? The Torah already said, so why does it say a second time Hinachta? It's talking about Tnufa. Now, this is, so Balachai was saying that he's saying that it already says Hanacha. But there's a rule, it's certainly in Kachim, and I think it's throughout, that anytime something is ma'akav, the Torah has to repeat it. You only have a din of la'akav, that's what Rashi says. You always need that something has to be repeated in order for it to be ma'akav. So he's, according to him, the second time it says hanacha is not talking about hanacha, but rather it's talking about tnufa. So I mean, I'm not sure how this works, and maybe I'll maybe we'll come across it one day. I would have thought that if the Torah says two psukim, rather than saying one of them is talking about Tenufa and saying that it's not, and Hanacha is not Ma'akav, why don't you say the second one is for Hanacha? The first one is to tell you that it's a mitzvah, and the second one to tell you it's Ma'akav. It's like a little hard to understand his line of reasoning, why he's saying Hanacha means something entirely different than what it says, rather than saying that it's the Ma'akav. But that's what he says. So he's coming out that he holds Hanacha is not Ma'akav. Umantana de Polagala de Rabbi Yehuda, who's Chalak on Rabbi Yehuda, Relazim and Yaakov, the Tanya Velokach HaKayin Haten B'Yadecha. He uses this pasuk Velokach HaKayin Haten B'Yadecha that he said to tell you that he said you learn Tnufa from the second Hanacha. Rabbi Yehuda said you learn not Tnufa from the second Hanacha. He learned Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov has a different source from it. It says Velokach HaKayin Haten B'Yadecha Limin al Bikurim She'enin She'teunin Tnucha. Divri Rabbi Elazar Yaakov. My time ahead is Velokach HaKayin Haten B'Yadecha min Tnufa. My time Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Asi Yad Yad Mishlam Ksev Velokach HaKayin Haten B'Yadecha Uksev Yadai T'B'Yenes Yisei Hashem. It says by Bikurim Velokach HaKayin Haten B'Yadecha, and it says by Shlomim Yadav T'B'Yenes. Both of them have a so it's a Gzeir Shava of Yad Yad. Ma Kan HaKayin Afla Lan Kayin. Just like by Shlomim, it has to be waived by the Kayin. So too by Bikurim. Emal Alam Bailam Af Kan Bailam. So the Bailam have to do Tnufa by both of them. So just first, before we get to what the Gemara is talking about, Lagabi, this din of Kayin and Bailam, but what we see is that he learns out Tnufa from a different source. He doesn't need the Hanacha to tell you Tnufa. So therefore the Hanacha is left to be Ma'akev, to be Shoni, to be repeated, Lagabi Bikurim, and therefore Bikurim will be Ma'akev. But the Gemara says, Hakket, that how do you have that the Tnufa is done both by the Bailam and by the Kayin? This we've had before. And Yechkan Yadav Tachas Yad Bailam Meinif. The Kayin puts his hand underneath the hand of the Bailam and they Meinif it together. Okay. Amar Rabba Barada, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Bikurim, me'emasai mechayiv aleh. From when are you mechayiv on Bikurim? Rashi explains, we've been talking about from when are you. We said when is that the Hanacha is mechayiv or Kriya. But Rashi explains, we're talking about here that a Zar who eats it is going to be chayiv. Right? There's a certain point when the Bikurim are brought, when they become the property of the Kayin and they're mutter to the Kayin, at that point it becomes possible. So for this din, the Gabi, until now we've been talking about when is the Kayin, prior to which point is the Kayin going to be mechayiv for eating it. Now we're talking about which point after which the Zar is going to be mechayiv because now it's mutter to the Kayin. So me'emasai mechayiv aleh.
Zar is the guy who's bringing it?
The Zar is the Bailam, yeah. Or any Zar, doesn't have to be him.
He said
Every Zar is not allowed to eat it. Once it becomes Bikurim, it's the Yidud Hanach or the Kriya, as the case may be. As we're going to see, the Zar is not allowed to eat it. It's only Mutter to Kohanim, just like Truma. Like
so on his way into Jerusalem, let's say he's traveling far away, he's able to eat it still?
it's not going to be a lav. He's not allowed to eat it. He has to give it to the Kohen, but it's not going to be a lav.
As soon as he picks it off, I thought like as soon as he picks it off,
He's not allowed to eat it, but it's not going to be the lav of eating Bikurim. The lav is once it becomes it gets like a kedusha when you go through this process. So when does that start? Mishayaru pnei habayis. This is from when it goes into the Beis Hamikdash. So it's a little bit before Kriya or Hanacha. Kaman ke'etana detanya. Belaza ayame bikurim miktsasam b'chutz miktsasam b'pnin. If you have bikurim, that part of it is outside of the Beis Hamikdash and part of it is inside. Shebechutz harein kechulin l'chol divrayim. That which is outside is considered chulin. What's inside is going to be hektish, and what legabi what? Now we know this is not legabi when the kayin is allowed to eat it because that comes either by kriya or hanacha. So this is talking about legabi the zar eating it. Amr sheshes bikurim hanacha makevespen kriya ein makevespen. This is what we said before. B'shem either Rabbi Yochanan or Rabbi Elazar b'shem Rabbi Shia. This is a third possible Mand Amr saying the same thing. So he says, Bikurim Hanacha is Ma'akav, Kriya is not Ma'akav, not like our Mishnah, not like the Rabban. Kaman, Ki'aitana de Tanya. So he says this comes from, he has a different Tana to support. Shlosha Dvarim, Yosi, I'm a Shlosha Dvarim Mishum Shlosha Skein. He said three. In the Bisman Hazeh, after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, bring it to Yerushalayim and eat it. V'yechlenu. We say v'dinu. Bechar tarn havas makkah. U'ma'isa sheni tarn havas makkah. He said no. We'll learn it out from Bechar that you can't do that because the Bechar has to be brought to the Beis Hamikdash, and the Ma'isa Sheni has to be brought to Yerushalayim. Ma Bechar eni ela b'fnei habayis, just like the Bechar can only be brought as a carbon by the Kayin when the Beis Hamikdash is around. Av Ma'aser eni ela b'fnei habayis. So too, Ma'aser is only when the Beis Hamikdash is around, and now that there's no Beis Hamikdash, therefore you can no longer bring Ma'aser Sheni to Yerushalayim and eat it. Right? That's why everyone has to destroy their Ma'aser today. Ma'aser Sheni from in Shemitah. What says? How can you learn that from Bechar? Bechar is a carbon. You need to do the whole avodah of a carbon. It has to be brought to the mizbech. Bikurim. So the Gemara says no. So we can't learn it out from Bechar. Let's learn it from Bikurim. Bikurim yechichum. That Bikurim also are not brought bisman hazeh. So the Gemara mal Bikurim shechein tunin hanacha. Bikurim have a din that they have to be placed. They have a separate din of being placed in front of the mizbech. Ma'aser Sheni doesn't have that din. So maybe Bikurim, since it needs to be placed in front of the mizbech, that's why it's no longer applicable. But maybe Ma'aser Sheni still is. Just has to be brought into Yerushalayim. So we say no. You have to learn that from a pasuk. Makkos Ma'aser leBechar. We don't have a hekesh of Ma'aser to Bechar. It's not just that we're saying it's the same with Kal V'Chaimer that we can make a percha, but it's a hekesh. Ma Bechar ein el lefnei habayis, af Ma'aser ein el lefnei habayis. Sak Gemara ve'im isa. If you're going to say, like we had originally said, that hanacha is ma'akev and kriya is not ma'akev, lifrach mal bikurim shechein tu'in kriya. If you'll say that bikurim,
Hanacha is ma'akev.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Amar she'ed bikurim hanacha ma'akev ben kriya ein ma'akev ben.
Right. We said right. Hanacha is ma'akev and kriya is not ma'akev. So this is the raya that kriya is not ma'akev. If you were to say that kriya is ma'akev, then we should have asked this question differently and say it instead of saying that bikurim is different because it has hanacha. You should say it has hanacha and kriya. Right? We're saying if kriya is also ma'akev, then it should also be it should be another distinction between bikurim and Ma'aser Sheni. Then he said, "Lifrach mal bikurim shechein tu'in kriya v'hanacha." Amar Rashi nihidi kuva leka mitzvah mi leka. Well, it says now. Listen, even if kriya is not ma'akev, it's still a mitzvah to do kriya. The Torah says you should do kriya. So if you're going to ask this as a question that it should say kriya, you'd say it even if it's not ma'akev. You should just say the mitzvah is a distinction between bikurim and Ma'aser Sheni. Let's ask from mitzvah as well. Since a ger who brings bikurim, he doesn't say the kriya at all. He's excused from the kriya. It doesn't apply to him. It's not something that's always included, so therefore we don't want to say that as the percha. We leave out kriya since it's not always applicable. In fact, the marvel it seems like that was where the Gemara was going before. We say we want to learn out Ma'aser Sheni. We say we can't learn it out from bikurim because it has hanacha. We can't learn it out from bechar because it's a carbon that has to be brought on the mizbech. So, but let's say a ma'atzad from between the two of them because bikurim is not a carbon and bechar doesn't have hanacha. So the Gemara both the bechar and bikurim. And they need to use the mizbech. Hanacha needs the mizbech, and doing the avodah for the bechar needs a mizbech. So tomorrow, Makkos. I'm going to ask but a general question. Let me ask you something. What do we hold? Do we hold that the Makom HaMikdash still has the kedusha that you're able to use it for karbanos today? Afilu bechar nami. Why are you assuming that bechar can't be brought? This is like a big thing. If you go to Yerushalayim, like a Teres Kainim, they'll show you the thing. They'll say we can bring up a carbon today. If you hold kuchel l'shaitel, it's remains the same kedusha, as long as you don't like if you make everything tar, which is a big problem because we don't have a para aduma to make people tar. But assuming you can make everyone tar, which is just a practical problem, why can't you bring a bachar even without a Beis Hamikdash? Just go to the makam of the mizbeach, build a mizbeach, and make bring the bachar. And ikasavar. So why you saying you're going to bring a raya from bachar, which is not shaykh bezmanazah? Maybe it is. And ikasavar kedusha and a kitchel asayt of a loy kitchel asalavai. Afilu bachar nami tibai. So this is a little strange, and the Gemara is going to explain in a minute what this means. He's saying if someone had brought a carbon prior to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and the bachar is still you still have the bachar, you should be able to bring it to the kohen should be able to eat it in Yerushalayim like the din of inside the Beis Hamikdash, just like the din of a regular bachar, or in Yerushalayim it's a kachim kalim. So the Gemara is asking, the man of shach, you should either it should always be mutter to bring the carbon, or even if you're no longer able to bring the carbon, you should be able to bring a previously brought carbon prior to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and eat it then. So why you bring a raya from here, from Bachar, that the Bisman Hazeh, it's not allowed. Really, it's not Mekudesh la'asid lava. The Makkah Mikdash doesn't remain in its kedusha. We're talking about, like we said, the case is that the carbon was brought before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and then the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. But the reason why it's going to be also to eat is because there's a pasuk we makash the basar of the bachar to the dam. Ma dam in mizbeach, absar in mizbeach. Just like the dam has to be brought on the mizbeach, the basar also has to be brought on there has to be a mizbeach, and since there's no more mizbeach after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, it's possible. Makkos ma'ishel bachar, and then finally we make a hekesh of ma'aser to bachar. So once we say that the dam, make a hekesh of the dam of the bachar to its basar, and since the dam can't be brought, the basar is also asar, and then we're max ma'aser to bachar. So can you make a double hekesh? That you're not allowed to do that by kachim. So tomorrow ma'aser dagan chulanu. No, it's not a problem because ma'aser sheni is chulin. It's not kachim, and this din that you can't make a hekesh on a hekesh is only on kachim. According to Manda Amar, that this din that you can't make a double hekesh, we go whether it's treated as kachim or not. It goes basar, the thing that you're learning from. So the thing that you're learning to. So that's ma'aser. But according to Manda Amar, that goes according to what you're learning from. If that's kachim, you can't learn it out with a hekesh. The first limud is not a hekesh; it's really a direct din. We're saying the basar and the dam are treated as equivalent by bachar, and since one is not available because the dam is not available because the mizbeach is destroyed, the same thing will happen to the basar. Okay, shkayach.